Donald H. Rumsfeld, whose roles overseeing the U.S. invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq and efforts to transform the U.S. military made him one of the most important and controversial Pentagon leaders in history, has died in Taos, NM. He was 88 years old. His family announced the death Wednesday in a statement on Twitter. Additional details were not immediately available. Rumsfeld's political prominence dates back to the 1960s and included stints as a rebellious young Republican congressman, favorite advisor to President Richard M. Nixon, right-hand man to President Gerald Ford, and Middle East envoy for President Ronald Reagan. It also scored high in business, helping pioneer products like NutraSweet and high-definition television and making millions of dollars saving large troubled companies. His greatest notoriety and national effect came during a 6-year reign as Secretary of Defense under President George W. Bush. Initially hailed for leading the U.S. military to war in the wake of the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001, Rumsfeld's handling of the Iraq War ultimately led to his downfall. Widely criticized for poorly planning the consequences of the invasion, he was slow to recognize the development of an insurgency, draft an effective strategy to counter it, and establish a clear policy for the treatment of prisoners. Stubborn for months by mounting calls for Rumsfeld's impeachment, Bush finally let him go in late 2006, 3.5 years into the Iraq War and right after an election in which Republicans lost control of both houses. Congressional. Rumsfeld's forced exit under clouds of guilt and disapproval cast a dark shadow over his previously illustrious career. None of his predecessors had risen to the top of the Pentagon with so much relevant experience. Having served as Secretary of Defense once before under Ford, he was the only person to get a second chance at the position. He held the record as the youngest leader in the Pentagon, and early in his tenure under Bush, he became the oldest. Donald Rumsfeld was more complex and paradoxical than the public caricature of him as a pugnacious and inflexible villain would suggest. A conservative Midwest, however, he exhibited a persistent drive throughout his life to shake up the institutions in which he served. A hawk in defense, he strongly supported civil rights legislation as a young congressman, worked on anti-poverty programs under Nixon, and promoted micro-businesses as a wealthy investor. At the Pentagon, he ruled with a heavy hand, persistently challenging subordinates, carefully studying the details of troop deployments, and insisting on a greater role in the selection of senior officers than his predecessors had exercised. While he was capable of great charm and generosity at times, he often seemed undercut with an aggressive, harsh, and disparaging demeanor that many found offensive. Senior officials complained that he treated them harshly, lawmakers complained that he did not respond to their requests or that he was disrespectful in his personal dealings, and senior State Department and White House officials described him as uncompromising, evasive and obstructive. He wielded a brave and skeptical intellect, wrote Douglas Faith, Mr. Rumsfeld's senior civil policy advisor at the Pentagon, in a memoir. But his leadership style didn't always serve his own purposes. He bruised people and made personal enemies, who were eager to try to discredit his work.